Welcome to the Dropping into Power podcast, where we'll be hearing stories about the transformational power of surfing from women surfers of all ages, all levels, and all over. We'll hear about courage, commitment, struggles, frustration, epiphany, and of course, life transformations large and small. I'm your host, Sheila Gallion, and I am stoked to share these conversations full of so much passion with all of you. Aloha and welcome to the Dropping into Power podcast. We're finally live again. This is officially season 2. And today we're starting out. It's taken quite a few weeks to get this together with Jessie. And this is how it goes when we all have busy lives and things that happen to us and things that happen to others. But finally, I think 8 weeks since we started, Jessie, we're finally getting to record this podcast. I'm really excited to talk to Jessie. She has a very unique story. And the lead off to that story is that she recently was a lifeguard at Tavarua, where many of us dream of ever setting foot, or I guess setting fin. It all came together in sort of a tumbling together of fate, and I'll let her tell some of that story. And also because her surf spot is the Outer Banks, which is a place that we've never talked about and I didn't know very much about. And she also had an entry into surfing through kitesurfing. So all kinds of fun things that we're going to get to talk about, Jessie, with you. And this is Jessie Kilgour. Before Jessie and I visit, I'm just going to give a short update, and I filled her in because there are many reschedulings. Part of that rescheduling was my head injury, being sliced with a fin. So bottom line, it's kind of this miraculous healing. And I want to say thank you to the many people who have checked in. And actually also there was a GoFundMe a friend of mine started and people have donated. And I want to thank you for that, for the medical bills side of it all. But it's insane. I'm sitting here 2 weeks later, just pretty much fine. I have a little lingering concussion symptoms. Sometimes I get a little nausea, definitely reaching for words. It's a little spooky to feel a little bit of the memory loss. But that feels, according to my research, pretty temporary. So overall, considering 2 weeks ago, I was literally spouting blood in the lineup out of my head, and I'm sitting here talking to Jessie. It feels pretty good. So not completely inappropriate to be talking to somebody with a lot of safety training, segueing into this. So I'll just put you on the spot, Jessie. What would you have done if you see a person with blood spouting out of their head?
Hi, thanks for having me, and I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
In the water, if someone was spurting blood, I'd do everything I could to get them out of the water as quick as possible.
And how hard is that to get someone out of the water?
That really depends, like where you are, what the currents are like. You know, if it's a place that's challenging to paddle out and you're fighting like heck to get out there, it's probably going to be hard to bring you in, especially if you don't have a jet ski. If you're just swimming someone in, it can be tough. And you know, realistically, if you're out there with someone like that, you're just on whatever board you have. So yeah, it can be a long process.
Have you had anybody with a head injury that you've dealt with?
Probably when I worked water rescue, but not, I'm for sure in my first aid experience, I've seen lots of head injuries, but not out surfing, like when I was out there with someone.
So what was your other safety background then?
Well, I probably started with lifeguarding when I was 16. And then when I moved to the Outer Banks, I worked on water rescue part-time.
Okay. And I don't think we talked about that. So what was that like?
It was cool. It started as volunteer work. So there wasn't a paid position. And over the years, it's developed into like a paid lifeguarding position. So they have crews on the beach with trucks, and so they're patrolling the beach, which is awesome. When I first moved here and started volunteering with water rescue, we just carried pagers, so it would be in the middle of summer, and like your pager goes off and you all hop in your cars, and whoever can get there goes and grabs the trucks, and then it goes to the person, or if you're on the beach, you book it down if that's closer than going to a car, and help out however you can.
Wow. So that sounds like that could have had a pretty serious lag time
We're pretty lucky. The town I live in is all of 5 miles long, so that definitely increased our response time. But for sure, it's like seeing how successful they are now and how many rescues. Like we had the fire department water rescue Christmas party, and it was I think about 30% of their calls and rescues that they made were observed, so not even called in, which is obviously making a huge difference, because they're there. But there are a lot of rip currents here, so it's pretty easy for people to get kind of in over their head, literally, and so to speak, like not being aware of how any of that works.
Talk about the Outer Banks, the graveyard of the Pacific. It's going to be an exotic place, I think, to a lot of people, and not understanding what kind of surf is there, and just a little bit about the place itself and what the wave is like.
It's a long strip of island. It's like a sandbar out in the middle of the ocean, essentially. It's connected, like there's bridges, so it's not so far out that you need a ferry, but it's just a little strip of beach. So all our waves are beach break. And they're definitely, it's hugely varied. Like we get tiny little longboard waves in the summer. Today I went for a walk on the beach and there was next to nothing out there. But then we'll also get quite large waves when the hurricane swell comes through. But it's a really unique spot because of where it sits. Like you have the different currents. It's like where the North and South Atlantic kind of converge. The island itself is constantly changing just from erosion and beach and the waves. And but it's a pretty unique spot, and it's, there's not a lot of trees. Everything's pretty windswept, but it's beautiful, but pretty unique.
And what are the swell directions then that work throughout the year?
The way the island's shaped is it runs north, south, and then at the point, Cape Hatteras area, like Buxton area, then it cuts kind of east-west. So you can pick up pretty much any swell direction except a west swell. So that makes it pretty unique, because it's depending on what you're getting, you can just relocate, if the swell's coming in from the south, and depending on what angle it's coming in at.
Because I would think a lot of places along the East Coast wouldn't have that exposure to be able to pick up the different directions. But then it get just famously stormy and terrifying. And, what is the story behind the graveyard of the Pacific?
Well, graveyard of
the Atlantic. Sorry, I'm such a Pacific girl.
So because there's so many shifting sandbars, and as major storms come through or northeasters, they'll over time shift the sandbars. So the history of that is that, ships would be coming through, and no one really, even if you had an idea, you didn't always have an idea of where the sandbars were. So there's, I don't know the numbers, but a record amount of shipwrecks off the coast here.
I'm really bad at geography on the eastern seaboard, so I don't even know how far that is from like Boston. So I know that's it's way south from there, right? Like
we're like the
North Carolina.
We're northeast North Carolina, so we're pretty close to the Virginia, North Carolina Virginia border.
It's pretty, I know I'm like nerding out on stuff right now, but it's fascinating as you go through the different inlets and waterways throughout the US, especially on the East Coast. Like you just realize how society built up, and why people are settled where they are and not other places, and how there was no way to transport things except through water. So it's kind of fascinating to see how that spread out. And that's my obsession with the Outer Banks for now. This journey for you, and this is again, like I was introduced to you as, oh my gosh, my friend Candace, who has been on the show and who is a ER doctor and gets to be a doctor at Tavarua. Candace was just so blown away by you. She just thought you were awesome. And she's like, you got to interview her. She's a lifeguard at Tavarua. So then we talked, and I loved hearing your story, how it kind of led up to it, because it's not the world's most likely story that you would end up in this position on that day. So you grew up in Canada. Were you anywhere near an ocean?
No, I grew up near Toronto. So that's like above, pretty much right above Buffalo, so
Sure.
Southern Ontario. So yeah. And so we spent time going to the Great Lakes growing up,
Okay.
but no, I mean, the occasional trip to the ocean, but nothing regular. So most of my water time was on the Great Lakes.
And was there any surf concept in your mind? Did you think about surfing? Did you know, especially any women surfers?
So obviously I knew snowboarding from being in Canada. So there's like that draw to a board sport. And I loved snowboarding. And it was like, when I was a teenager, it was a part of my identity. So there would be a little bit of crossover sometimes in the marketing and that you'd see surf stuff. And I always knew a lot about the water, but it wasn't like there's no surf culture. I'd say my biggest introduction to surfing was Blue Crush. So
right.
So women surfing was like forefront there, but it wasn't really anything that like I knew of it for sure. I knew what surfing was, but beyond that, I didn't know much about it at all.
Now, in the snowboard community, it's because, I mean, it's definitely changing in surfing, but for such a long time, it was really just so dominated by boys and men. A lot of women, 40s and 50s, just never saw women surfing, at that time. What is it like in the snowboard culture? Is it more equal, or what did you find?
I'd say it's more equal for sure. Like, I learned to snowboard when I was 12, and it wasn't like a rare thing that I was a girl taking snowboard lessons. For sure, there is still more men on average, I'd say, but it's pretty equal. Like, it wasn't a big variation in terms of that, or in terms of like being welcomed or seeing each other. For sure, snowboarding was newer. Like when I started snowboarding, my grandpa, who was a big skier, was convinced snowboarding was just a phase. And that like snowboarding was going to leave. So we're snowboarding, I think maybe, but I'd say pretty equal. There was like a huge difference when I first started watching snowboarding at a professional level, like the Olympics and that. There used to be a huge variation in terms of what level the women were riding to in comparison to the men, which I think is very much gone away. You
That's
watch
amazing.
the Olympics now and you can barely say, oh, that's a man or a woman, without obviously the introductions that they get.
Well, it's interesting because I've skied a long time ago, but I haven't ever snowboarded. But, just from watching and observing, there will always be some division, I think, between men and women in surfing. If you're only measuring by strength and size, I don't happen to find that relevant. It's not more interesting to me if a man can paddle into a bigger wave or has more power or speed in a different way, because I just think that both forms are beautiful. And, there's the advancement of women is, insane over the last couple of years. But there'll probably be some, I don't think there's as many women who, well, I shouldn't say that. I don't know. There might be as many women who power into huge waves like that. Though I do remember Tyler Wright talking about when she had this debilitating virus and she lost a lot of weight and she hasn't been able to put the weight back on. And so her physical ability to throw herself over the lip into a bigger wave is just diminished. Like, she literally can't get the weight. And then I wonder about the upper body weight, if there's some advantage with that. So there might always be some division to some extent in some circumstances with surfing, but it'll be interesting to see how that develops. What drew you to the water when you were so embedded really in snowboard culture? I know it's not year round, so I guess there's that.
Yeah, that was one part of it. And I grew up in the water a lot. Like, my grandma used to run a pool and manage a pool. So it was instilled pretty early on that you needed to know how to swim and you needed to be able to be safe in the water. So definitely grew up in a family where there's like, most people love the water. So that was always a huge part. Like, I grew up loving playing in the waves, even if they were just on the Great Lakes. Like, so that, as being in high school where you're just like, whatever you're doing is the most intense thing and so part of who you are. I had snowboarding and was super passionate about that, but then I kind of realized, I don't really have anything for the summer. So my uncle had taught windsurfing or coached windsurfing at a pretty competitive level. So I asked him to teach me how to windsurf, and he was not about doing that.
Yeah. I remember you saying he said no.
There was two reasons he shut me down. One, it was like right on the verge of kiteboarding kind of gaining more traction as a sport. So he's very adamant that nobody kiteboards or nobody windsurfs anymore. Everyone kiteboards, which that didn't matter to me. I just wanted something to do. So I asked him to teach me how to do that. He also said no. But he would come down to the Outer Banks to windsurf. And so he brought me and my family one year and got me a couple lessons at the store at Real Watersports where I work now. Yeah, so I tried that and it was okay. I wasn't by no means had the same passion for it as snowboarding. Like I remember after my first lesson or two thinking, oh, it's fun, but it's not snowboarding.
That was kite surfing or windsurfing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with the kite surfing. Yeah.
So what eventually drew you back?
When I was in college, I wanted a new summer job, and my uncle was saying that it was pretty easy to come get a job for the summer, like in the Outer Banks. So that's what I did.
So you became a pretty avid kite surfer.
Yeah.
So what finally flipped the switch that you said, okay, this is actually pretty fun. It's not that boring.
Funny. Some days I'm not even sure if it is that fun. No, it is very fun. So the first summer I was here, the wind wasn't super strong. And back when I started learning to kite, the gear was not as efficient or as techy as it is now. So it was much harder to, like, you needed a much stronger wind to make a kite function well, and to be able to go out and ride and have fun. So the first summer I was here, the wind wasn't great. So I didn't get to kite a ton.
Okay.
But it's pretty easy to walk over to the ocean. And so I took up surfing. And there was always kind of this like pull where I would gravitate a bit more towards surfing because there was less gear. There was, I was almost just less stressed out doing it because I knew I knew how to swim and I knew I could get in and out of the water. Whereas with kiting, I would get pretty nervous and you had to choose the right kite size and make sure your lines and everything are correct. So I would get intimidated there and was always just drawn a bit more to surfing, I think, for that. Kiting was definitely in the learning stages, was a bit of a love-hate relationship. You know, I'd like go out, have a good session, it would be good. And then the next time I'd go kite, I'd feel like I was back to square one. But I don't know exactly like when that switched. I think probably when I became self-sufficient and I could go out independently, and, you know, I'd still need to check with friends and make sure I was on the right gear or doing stuff like fine tuning it, but it wasn't intimidating and it wasn't like this big science, like math equation I had to try and figure out to make it good. So
it does look really complicated to me. I remember when, like in the early 2000s, I think I was in LA, probably 2001, 2002, and people were just starting to kite surf that I knew about. And it was an ordeal. And they would come down with all this equipment and then take off. And, you know, there were times that I saw just complete disasters out there, them getting all tangled up in their equipment and trying to get back. And then when I lived on Maui, which is a big kite surfing place, the wind is so strong there. I mean, there were constantly stories about people just being blown out of the water and like smashed into the trees. And, you know, it seemed intimidating, but I hadn't really thought about the other side of it. Like when there's not enough wind, and that could have its whole other issue. Or suddenly the kite, everything, I assume, comes tumbling out of the sky if you have no wind. And there you are. But it seems like a good balance in case there's no waves. Like, so how much is it just all about wind, or you need swell too for kite surfing?
Well, so there's like kite surfing, kiteboarding can kind of be thought of as the same thing. Some people would think of kite surfing specifically when you're using a surf style board.
Ah, got it. Okay.
Because you can change what board you're using. Like there's a wake style avenue you can take kiting where people are doing tricks a lot more similar to what you would do on a wakeboard or behind a wake boat.
Okay.
So you don't, when you're like most of our lessons here, and most people kite in the Sound, which is just the flat bay area. So you definitely don't need swell. It's very wind dependent. But for kite surfing, just like surfing, you can take it into the ocean and do it in anything from like a foot wave to, you know, massive waves.
To Jaws. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Jaws and Jesse Richmond.
Yeah, to that sort of madness.
Yeah.
So at some point, it clearly surfing got hold of it. Oh no, first I have to ask this question. So do you ever get to see, do you ever watch kook slams on
I
a
don't, because I can't stand watching people get hurt, but I know what's on
well,
there.
I hope they're not showing people actually get hurt. That would be awful. But they do
Yeah.
occasionally show people being picked up and carried out for a long way and then dropped into the ocean. Yeah, I don't want to watch people get hurt. Usually there's a disclaimer saying this person was okay. But
Okay.
so mostly I'm just wondering if you ever have people like picked up and like dropped suddenly, are there dramatic occurrences? And do you have to go rescue them?
It's pretty rare there's dramatic occurrences like you'll see there where someone just gets picked up and tossed somewhere. I mean, you for sure in the learning process or just kiting, you can get flung a decent distance, like a big, like a good wipeout getting pulled, like falling off a wave or something. But yeah, I've seen some injuries for sure. I've seen some bizarre things happen where people are, there's a storm front and all of a sudden the wind goes from 20 miles an hour to 40 miles an hour.
Oh my gosh.
It's situations like that I've seen are pretty obvious. Like there were a lot of clear indicators that the person should have gotten off the water. Like there's a storm front coming, the sky goes black. Like
right.
So, absolutely. You can have some pretty dramatic things go wrong with kiting and have some pretty terrible injuries.
Yeah.
But it's not like something that can just magically happen.
Right.
It like requires bad gear selection, bad judgment. You can still have like a nasty wipeout on a wave, even though you're skilled and you're making the right choices. But
so how do you get back up when you're out there? Like if your kite comes down in the water, how do you get back up?
There's the way you maneuver the bar, you can relaunch the kite pretty easily.
Okay.
So on flat water, it's usually quite easy to relaunch a kite. When you start getting into the waves in the ocean, then you've got the added element of breaking waves on top of it.
Yeah.
But then that can get a bit more challenging. Often, if someone's kiting out in large waves, there's a point, especially here in the Outer Banks, like where everything just washes up on shore. There's definitely a point where if I can't relaunch my kite after one decent sized wave hits it, I'm punching out. Or sometimes it's like, as I see that wave coming down onto the kite, I'm releasing all my gear so that I can stay away from it. And I just let the kite go into the beach.
Oh, okay. And then you swim in, or are you on your board and paddling in?
Swim in. Or hopefully your board's nearby. Usually you don't wear a leash just because it's one less thing being pulled towards you.
So the leash is connected to your board, not to your kite. So you have like a harness.
Yeah.
Are you connected to your kite or just holding onto it?
Okay. Yeah, like windsurfing, you have a harness. So you have a harness that goes around your waist and then you connect. There's what's called a chicken loop on the kiteboarding bar that connects to it. So, you don't have to be death gripping the bar or holding with all your force. Like the power is connected to your harness and your hands are just steering.
Oh, I always wondered about that. Okay. Because that would be, I always thought that could be challenging. Like, how do you manage that, but your own body swaying? I mean, it looks fun to me too. There's just only so many impossible sports I can try in my life. So, that's hats off to you to, going for multiples, but I do think it's really fascinating and gives you more options. The one that I wish I had it in me to learn is foiling. Yeah. I've done e-foiling, which was so fun, but the learning curve of dealing with those super sharp harpoon and then the athleticism to really get that going, I think I might have missed my window on that, but I'm watching people who are getting good on it now. And just when I did the e-foiling, have you ever done that or have you foiled? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's so fun. You're flying. You literally are flying. It's so smooth and amazing. So do you foil too?
Yeah. So we have e-foils at our school and then I kite foil. I'm learning how to surf foil.
Oh, kite foil. Okay. So kite foiling, you're using the wind to propel and then just the foil pop up like from Wild.
So just like on the e-foil when you would like use the remote to accelerate yourself.
Then you get more speed.
For the foil. Similar thing, like you're using the kite to build up power so that you can get onto foil. And have you surf foiled too? You said you're learning? I have. So in Fiji, actually, we were doing a bunch of tow foiling just into smaller waves. And so that I could handle and was starting to learn, but I haven't been successful at paddling into waves and getting on foil yet. So that's
I'm told that it's like that it's opposite, like that how you lean your weight is opposite compared to surfing. So I don't know if that is true, but
it requires a lot. Like to keep the foil down, like from getting on foil, you have to keep your weight much further forward than you would on a surfboard.
Yeah.
So it's definitely an added element. Well, obviously I think it's more challenging than surfing because I've just started learning it, but yeah, it is a different dimension. And then a lot of my friends who are really good at surf foiling, they talk about if they do it too long, that it does hinder their actual surfing. So
right. That's what I've heard is it kind of, there's something in the rhythm of, they're really different. I mean, I'm kind of a purist. I think, there's just something to me so special about surfing. I like being prone. I like being that close to the water. I like not having a giant sharp pontoon underneath, especially after my recent injury. I know there was a young kid in our community whose thumb got like chopped from the e-foil.
Oh my God.
Yeah, really terrifying. So, but anyways, what looks amazing to me is the ability to go places other people can't go. And so you can get out of the crowded breaks. But then I guess once foiling gets crowded, then that'll really be scary. Then I will not be anywhere near those people.
I do think you could absolutely foil. I don't think that's out of your skill set or like
thank you.
Capable of learning.
It looks so fun. Just a totally different thing because that glide is incredible.
Yeah. It's a unique feeling.
I don't know if I have it in me to, I don't know. I thought about it for a while because a friend is getting really good at it or my friend's wife, and she offered momentarily and then the window sort of shifted. And anyways, that's all right. One of these days, we'll see. We'll see. So let's talk a little bit about Tavarua. So, okay, well, first let's set you up a little bit more in your surfing. So, there you are. So you're doing both things and you're kind of clearly been drawn in because I doubt you went to school specifically for this life you have right now. So clearly something has pulled you into, but you have a cool job, actually. Tell us a little bit more about your job.
Yeah, I manage the kite school or the kite and surf school at Real Watersports. So it's a pretty huge operation. We have like a retail side, rentals, accommodations. And so the school, I manage all the coaches and take care of all that side of the, of getting people on the water.
So what I love about this story is I hear it over and over again that people follow a particular passion and then come into a way to get through and get by and be inspired in the world. This is not something you ever would have thought of. Like I interviewed Chris Primacio, who just started volunteering for surf therapy and now is the chairman of the International Surf Therapy Organization. And just, you basically started volunteering in water safety. And then I remember you also saying, like, if you teach me how to surf, like I can teach surfing.
Yeah.
So you sort of, you had the drive to kind of get to there, but suddenly it's like opened into this whole other world that's pulled you totally into the water. So tell me a little bit about the progression of your surfing itself throughout this time period. Oh, and do you mind if I ask how old you are?
I'm 38.
Okay. So you've been at this for how many years?
A long time. I think the first summer here I was 20, my first summer I came down here.
Okay. That's so cool. So what was your progression in surfing and prone surfing?
Yeah. It started as just kind of like a fun thing to do when there wasn't wind. And we had the house I was living at, we had an old Bic board. I couldn't even tell you the size, but probably 8 or 9 feet. And all us roommates would just fight over it, like who could get to it and who would get to use it. But I kind of like surfing was kind of, and getting in the water, trying to figure out surfing was kind of a way to relax after work. Like when I first started working down here, I worked in the shop. So despite offering that I could teach it if they just taught it to me, they said that I needed some time to learn the sport first, which is good. But so we would just go out after work, and I had a friend who he was pretty passionate about just getting on the water as well. And we would go in anything, like the most terrible wind shop when no one else was going surfing. We would
I love that.
get boards and go surf. I couldn't even tell you what song, but some terrible, I think it was like an a cappella song or something that we would blast before we would go to get ourselves pumped up for going into what we knew was going to be terrible conditions.
Right.
So yeah, that summer, the first summer I was here, I got to the point of being able to, go down the line and surf at a beginner level. And then I would often get intimidated with, I rode a 7-foot board a lot, and I would get intimidated trying to get out through the waves. The waves here, because it is all beach break, they're pretty kind of dumpy and steep for their size. Even a small wave can be quite powerful. The continental shelf is isn't that far off from shore, so it'll bring tons of power.
Okay, that
the
makes
waves
sense.
Too.
Yeah.
There are times where like a chest high wave feels terrifying because it's just so heavy.
Yeah.
So I would get pretty intimidated of trying to get a longboard out through the waves. Then again, like a weird twist of fate, my mom and grandma were visiting one summer, and I was at work, and they went swimming, and they found a shortboard in the ocean. Isn't that this nice, like undinged shortboard? And so I called all the other surf shops and called to see if it belonged to anyone, told people about it. But then I just took to riding this board because it was mine. And it was 86.3, like a board that my skill set did not warrant me being on by any means.
And how tall are you?
5'9".
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's a small board. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so I just kept using that because I liked it, that I could get through the waves. Like I stood a chance of duck diving. And so to me at the time, that was enjoyable, even though I wasn't catching that many waves. It allowed me to get in and out. And so I don't know if that hurt my progression or helped it. I don't know. But so then I just kind of progressed and eventually got my own board that was properly sized for me, but still a short board. And then, just most days, well, no, I'd say most seasons getting better, but it doesn't always feel like that.
It's funny how you can stall, right? And think, you've made all this progression, and then it's like as if you go backwards or just can't seem to, get another anything. So 100%. I definitely know those feelings. Well, you must have been judged pretty competent in the surf. So tell us how you ended up in the beloved Tavarua. What is the word I'm looking for? I don't know. See, this is where my words are lost, but the thing you dream about, kind of.
So we have the shop. Real is a huge retail space as well. And we're really closely connected to a lot of the vendors, like in the kite, the surf, the foil industries. And Armstrong, one of the top foil manufacturers, they invited a group of us to go with them to Fiji, to Tavarua. So not growing up in surf culture, I knew of it, and I knew of Fiji, and I knew of Cloudbreak, but it wasn't I call it the dream I didn't know I had.
Right.
Right. I was like, oh my gosh, this is what everyone dreams about as a kid. But I didn't have that dream because I didn't grow up surfing.
Right.
So it was pretty special and incredible to be invited on this trip in the first place. And so we were going and, do a lot of surfing and foiling and testing gear. And so it was just really special to be able to go.
So describe a little about Tavarua. I didn't know about it until, maybe 8 or 9 years ago. I mean, I just wasn't in that world. I surfed, but I just didn't really know about it. And, it's kind of a heart-shaped island, and it's it's home to Cloudbreak. Well, I'll let you kind of talk a little bit about it. One of the big deals about Tavarua is, I believe, it's about $5,000 a week to go there. So that's kind of the prohibitive piece for a lot of people. So
Yeah.
that's part of what makes it the fantasy. And then just, I know that some of the other areas around, you can stay in other places, but then you have to drive around a lot by boat to see. And sometimes places are crowded, whereas, from this island, you can see a lot of breaks. So yeah, just, paint the picture a little bit so we can live through you vicariously.
It's a beautiful heart-shaped island. But what you were referring to, I think, was that like up until like I don't know how many years, but it used to be that the only way you could surf Cloudbreak was if you were staying on Tavarua. Like there was some connection of the rights there, so it was exclusive.
That's right.
I don't know. I don't want to say ownership. I don't know how it worked, but exclusive rights to it. But it's a beautiful tropical island, beach all the way around. There's some rocky parts on the back side of the shore, but it's just palm trees, beautiful crystal blue water. They have an amazing reef right out front where they do like giant clam rehabilitation, almost like they protect them there. And so it's the prettiest reef I've ever snorkeled. But it's gorgeous. It's little berets, so tropical, little kind of not huts, but near that, and just like rich with the Fijian culture, like beautiful everything.
I guess, yeah, from what I know, because I have a friend who's gone for many years, it's just very special, and it's very special to be invited. I think that gives it a really so you're, because I certainly don't want to pitch this to anybody as some big tourist destination that everybody should go to. Like that's not really the tone that I want to set with it. I actually just think it was really special that you got invited and then ended up in this next situation that I want you to talk about, like, how you ended up. So, because it is, I think, very much an honor that you happened to be a part of this. And it's a special part of surf culture and a special part of the people that have opened up Tavarua for the number of people that get to come. Like it is exclusive, not in the same way exactly, but I think it's still pretty exclusive. So, it's good. You have some good juju for having all of this unfold for you. And,
I feel very lucky for sure.
So we get to share in it. So while you were there, you were testing different, that's what you were saying there. You were testing different, water types.
Like we were just using the latest gear that Armstrong had and, getting the feel for it. So when we come back, we can pitch it to our customers better and then also give our input.
Okay.
But me being the least experienced foiler, the other guys who came with me, they know their stuff on foiling. I was definitely learning along the way. I knew the basics.
So were you doing different throughout the day? Were you surfing some prone and some foil and some, all over the place?
So we'd usually surf in the morning and then foil in the afternoon, depending on what the swell was doing. And
how big was it while you were there?
The biggest day, I think, was 6 to 8 feet.
Faces.
I don't know.
I think that because I have a feeling those faces felt bigger. I
don't know how they read it.
Just because I know I saw some pictures from my friend the week after, and it could have changed, but I think it feels bigger than that based on how that wave works. I would imagine.
I would agree for sure. I attempted the biggest waves in my life for sure.
So, all right, we'll get to that because I want to hear about the best waves of your life. But so how did you end up in this position to be I think you said it's not really a lifeguard. There's another word for it.
We call them surf guides. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you end up in this position?
So we were the week that I was there as a guest, we were one of the managers, Dylan, we became friends with him. And I think there was an emergency the week I was there, and I had been talking to him a bit about it. So I think he knew I had a first aid background and a first responder background. And so I think that little seed was planted in his head, which is good. And then we were leaving. So it was the Saturday and we were supposed to be going home. And I was traveling with two of my friends. And so the way it works is they get people off the island in the morning, but they take all the gear and the board bags in one boat prior and get it to get it to the airport, and then you meet your gear there, just because it's so much to transport in these small boats. So the boards and everything were already over on the main island, and we had gotten to stick around just a little longer on Tavarua itself than most guests, just to help with, like, Candace was coming in a day late, and the doctor who was the week that I was a guest had to hang out a little longer. So just, again, like, it all just worked out, this wonderful coincidence of, I don't know, surf gods or what was happening, but it all worked in my favor very well. And as we were leaving, the manager had just gotten off the phone with one of the incoming surf guides who had travel delay or interruption. And so Dylan was kind of looked at me and asked me if I wanted to stay. So I'm like fully packed, already like a beer in hand for the boat, very mentally like, we're leaving. It's super sad I'm leaving. And then this opportunity of just being asked to stay was like mind blowing. It was pretty funny. And luckily one of the guys who I was traveling with, he's my direct supervisor. So it made it a little easier with the time difference and everything to be like, hey, so can I do this? Like, I know I just took a ton of time off for this, but can I stay and do this? So it was hilarious. Like, one of the friends, he was watching this go down, and he texted me later. He's like, I wish I could describe to you what your face looked like as this was unfolding. I'm like going through everything in my head, like, oh my gosh, okay, what things was I supposed to get done when I got home? Like, I've just been on this week vacation where I've totally mentally checked out, and I'm going through the checkpoints. I'm like, okay, yeah, I can stay. And I got approval. So it was pretty cool to just
instantaneously, all of that went through your mind in seconds. Like,
so, more things happening than, and like,
did you know really what that was going to mean? Like, okay, will you stay and be a surf guide? Did you already have some clue? Because there was a person on your boat that did that.
Yeah, I'm a little, for sure. Like, I had watched, I've watched how our surf guides like kept an eye out for us, and I watched a lot of their daily routines just in observation, but because I manage a school, so I was just kind of watching the way they did things.
I see.
And just picking up like that's really good how they do that. And so I watched a bit, but also, like, there was a part of me that was checked out. I was like, whoa, I'm on vacation. Like, I don't have to take care of anyone. This is the break. Okay, cool. I'm going, not much thought into it. So that was one of my questions when I was like, yes, I want to stay. What are my job responsibilities? The manager seemed he was concerned because I was, then in the boatman beret with the guys. He's like, you're going to have to bunk up with the guys. I'm like, no, that doesn't stress me out at all. I just need to know, like, what are my responsibilities? And I don't, I didn't want to come up short on any end, but so it's pretty fun.
Yeah. So now you're surf guide. So now what happens?
Yeah. So I mean, obviously I got the lay of the land and what needed to happen, but like the typical day in surf as a surf guide, you're obviously safety's the number one priority. You're there if someone needs to be patched up or helped out or pulled out of the water. But luckily
but you're not sitting in the boat, you're out surfing with them.
No, yeah. So you're out surfing. You get assigned kind of a different boat. Like, there's a first light boat and then a mid-morning boat. So there's about 4 or 5 different assigned boats that go out. So they need a guard or a guide on every boat going out. So you kind of just talk with the other guides, rock, paper, scissors, who gets what.
So you said you were bunking with the guys. So and I know they're called boatmen. I don't know if they're boat women. I haven't heard of some, but there probably are now and again. I'm not sure, but how many women did you encounter as either? I know Candace is a surf doctor, but as surf guides, or how common is it for it to be a woman? Do you think?
I don't think it's super common. It sounded like, and this is just from what they told me, I imagine there's been others, but it sounded like Paige Alms was the last surf guides.
Okay, you're in good company. Wow.
And I've met Paige a few times, and we're kind of buds. So I was pretty flattered by that. And obviously she's a legend.
Yes,
And,
right.
and so, but it was funny because when I was in like the check-in area, the guest office, and was sorting some things out to rearranging my flights when we made the choice, and some guests were coming in, and one of them actually thought I was Paige for a second. We're like, she's a bit taller, but we're like kind of similar builds, like similar hair color. And so it was pretty funny.
Nice.
That's about the best compliment I could have, to be mistaken for Paige.
Yes, absolutely. Didn't you have a boat full of all women?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I think it was the second or third boat I took out, just ended up being a group of women and one man. And it was really cool, just like the vibe they brought. And they were, because it's not, it's like surf culture anywhere. It's women aren't the general majority.
Yeah.
So that was pretty special. And it was, the boat was, Candace was in the boat. So you got the ER doc, you had women who were like pro level skiers. So a pretty cool group. And then we had one girl she was, I think, 16 maybe, and she was starting to learn. So she was catching starting to like paddle into her own waves kind of thing. She was popping up and doing great, but there was this big spread of experience with surfing. So, and it was just a really fun vibe. And I think everyone just kind of appreciated that. So it was cool. The next day, they all found me and asked if they could do another women's boat, girls' boat.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because without that different kind of I think often what women can bring, and we can be competitive, we can be all of those things, but I think we give a little more permission to fail, like.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think
like, it's just like, okay, that's all right. Cause there's just an extra level. Sometimes, when we're learning, and often starting later, not so much in that girl, but it's also just a different mindset, so I think that can be just a lot more nurturing, and just like, and fun, just have that, I don't know, it just takes the pressure off. You don't feel so much like somebody's breathing down your neck or judging you necessarily, can be. And, I've been that woman too. I'm human. I'm not always nice in the water, but I try. So did you have any safety incidences, while you were?
While I was working, none on the water, at least not in the boats I had. I mean, you'd have people like ding the reef and you're just double checking a little scrape or cut. There's a land injury, a broken toe.
Okay. All right.
Knock on wood. I also felt very lucky that there weren't any, anything major.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, I guess do multiple boats go to the same break at the same time? Because I was like, well, what happens if the surf guy gets injured? I guess they must have to call another surf guy and have somebody, come. I mean, it's cool that they don't make you just sit on the boat, that you get to surf while you're at it.
And for sure, I did notice, like, I was surfing differently as the guide.
Oh, okay.
Like I had this higher sense of responsibility when I was a guest. Like, well, right. Just got to take care of me.
Right. Exactly.
As a guide, I was, I felt much more like, okay, I need to be able to be in a spot where I can see everyone and check on them when they take a heavier wave on the head or something. Like I felt like I needed to be in it was definitely more of like an oversight or overseeing kind of vibe where I felt responsible for other people. And so I like definitely noticed I wasn't taking off on as big or as challenging a waves.
Yeah.
I didn't want to, like you were saying, like, I didn't want to be, day one of lifeguarding, becoming
the rescue. That would be bad. That would be bad. So this is going to seem like a weird segue because it is something we had talked about before. And I know you had like a tampon incident, on the island. And it's something we haven't talked about because for some reason I've talked more to women who have been like, we've talked about menopause, later down in life, but most, huge amount of our lives is spent dealing with our periods. And for those women who surf, it has a whole other connotation. And then kind of in this, I want to talk a little bit about you guys. You said you and your friends have a tagline of barrels before babies. So I want to touch on both those things. But first, I kind of love this story that you had planned for the number of tampons to bring, with you. I'm like, what is your experience on surf trips with dealing with this? And what was your Tavarua experience?
So normally, like, I've done a lot of surf and kite trips. So generally I'll just throw, like, even if I, go through the calendar, I look what's happening. I'm like, okay, I'll be fine. I still usually just throw a couple tampons in just in case. And for this trip, I mean, I didn't. I don't know why. Because, like, often I'm wondering why I brought 5 tampons with me when there was almost zero chance that I was going to stay there long enough to get my period.
Right.
But so it was funny when I was going through the checklist of, like, okay, can I stay? That was one of them. I was like, oh man, okay. No, I should be fine. I was like, I don't think I'm going to get it. I'm not going to get it. I'll be fine.
Yeah. Well, because you're on an island, like you're on an island, not an island like Hawaii. Like you're on an island far away from another island that is peopled mostly by men.
Mm-hmm.
So right.
And the only gift, like the only store on there is this little gift shop. And so I had it in my head. I was like, okay, I think I did see some tampons there if needed. But I was like pretty convinced it was not going to be an issue. But sure enough, the last day or the second to last day, I was like, oh, yay, not as exciting. But I went in and they did have tampons, but they were not, they were the same like brand and absorbency that I get back home, but they were not of the same quality. And I mean, it sounds weird to talk about, but I mean, I'm pretty open. Like, you know what your flow is generally, and you're like, okay, I've got this time period that I can be totally cool. If I go over a couple, like an hour or two, then I'm getting into the questionable zone. And
right,
on this day, if I'm like that much over, I know what's going to happen.
And the questionable zone, when you're in crystal clear water out a good distance from land, is uncomfortable. Like,
and even the like the safety side of it to an extent. And it's like, for sure, I've had times where I've stayed out in the water too long and I like get into my car and it's like, okay, I just trashed a towel, no big deal. But for sure, when you're like the guide and you're getting everyone out of the water, you're like, the last thing I want to do is sit down on this white thing and potentially get up and there be blood there. And this boat full of men who, some of them are already uncomfortable that they have, or seem uncomfortable that they have a female lifeguard. Like,
oh my
gosh, this is just too many layers.
That is hilarious. Oh yeah, what was that like? Did you get any? It sounds like there was maybe a little attitude from some people. They were uncomfortable. There is.
I mean, I'd like to think it didn't have anything to do with me being a woman, but there was like one or two. For the most part, everyone was super supportive, and like the other boatmen surf guides had zero problem with it. Like no group of people had any problem with it. But there was one guy who kind of made a comment, and he was coming on the girls' boat, and he kind of made a comment, and I was like, I can't tell if that's loaded or not. I was like it kind of, I'm like, maybe this is just his way of joking around. And I kind of joked, but like a bit aggressively back to him. I was like, hey, like, I'm stoked to have you on the girls' boat, but you can't come here questioning my abilities and authority. So you're welcome to join us, but you got to get on board and be happy and trust that I can take care of you.
That's right. Well, yeah. I mean, it's kind of, I got to say, it doesn't rate him really high on the intelligence level if you're going to alienate the person who may have to save you. Like that's probably not the time to, like, if he wants to bully you after, maybe, And
I don't, I could be taking that totally wrong. No, there's for sure times where I'm like, ooh, this person has a problem with it. And when I taught, occasionally I could tell people had a problem but this one was a bit questionable, but it was still kind of cracked me up a little.
Yeah.
And it's like,
it is. It's unfamiliar. I mean, it's unfamiliar for a lot of people to, I mean, at this point, of course, we see women doctors all the time. I mean, even when I was growing up, I had women doctors once I was in college, but not growing up, And
I think this guy, again, questionable, but I think it was more, I don't think he was questioning my first aid skills at all. It's like, I'm very confident in that. Like, I know I could get you out of the water and take care of you if needed. Yeah. It almost seemed like maybe it was a bit more of questioning my surf ability.
Oh, I see.
Which was also kind of funny because it's like, hey, I don't need to I don't need to be like out there with John getting the deepest, biggest barrel to pull you out if you're injured.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Different skill set. Very different skill set. Yeah. That's funny. So, and what is, we touched on this a little bit, and, in that all throughout the 30s, I just remember this constant, just seemed like every other person would ask you about babies. Every other person would ask you about kids. And I'm curious, how, if it's changed at all now that there's, it's only been 20 years, but it's been 20 years, you have this mantra, barrels before babies, which I love, by the way.
My friend said that once.
I'm working on barrels after babies. Like mine's 17 now, and I'm hoping to get a surf trip where it'll put me in a position where I can try and get barreled. So I'm working on that side, but yeah, I'm just curious how that's feeling for women your age these days.
I feel like I'm probably not the average representation of what women are getting, just because I do live in a fairly secluded place doing, not the most traditional job, and I'm lucky I don't have, I don't have parental pressure, but for sure I think about it a lot. Like definitely this year when I turned 38, I did feel like all of a sudden, like, oh wow, 38, that's close. It's getting close to 40. Like, okay. I know what the average biology is on this, and what, you're like become a high risk pregnancy. And I'm not feeling it right now. Like I want to have a child right now. But when I was younger, I for sure thought I wanted to have kids and was pretty certain about it. And now I think as I get older and get closer to this like potential maybe time frame that, I may or might not have how many years left to make that happen. There is a lot more that I kind of think about, and not pressure anyone puts on me, but like the pressure of biology, the pressure of figuring out what it is I want and what I'm doing. And I think, there is a huge question of how's that adjust your lifestyle? How's it the freedom?
Well, thank you for, really, truly, thank you for sharing that. I know that these are tender spots and like such important part of all along, so I have a movie I wrote called Dropping In, and we have an amazing director, and I'm hoping I get to make some more official announcements, but that's kind of what spawned even me doing the podcast, because my story transformed my life a lot. But the character, this is amazing. I literally wrote this story, the first draft 20 years ago. Like that's how many, and then it almost got made, and then it went on the back burner, and then I rewrote it, and a lot of different things have happened, but the character was 36. And it was such a huge decision to decide. In my early drafts, I didn't even answer the question, because, this person's just getting a divorce in the movie. And I remember, it is a lot of internal pressure. Finally in the latest draft, the question comes up, but I just think I don't know, all these things as women, it's important to talk about, and it does affect surfing. I interviewed a woman who was just finding herself again after having children and had lost her surf identity. And it was really hard for her. Like she now has she worked out this whole thing. She's awesome. Shannon, all right, whatever, head injury, we're not going to say her name, but she's under California Active Mom. And, she actually was in rehabilitating her body from the problems that she had from her second child, got fully back into it. But, it isn't a question men have to answer. They typically don't have to give up their passion.
I know.
Because they have children.
Me out.
So it's gnarly, it's a gnarly thing. And, I started surfing just a couple years before I had my daughter at 40. It was a surprise. And I just want to tell you, and the women out there, I know statistically there's that thing, but I have this amazing doctor. He's like, you're not high risk at 40. He's like, if you're healthy and whatever, he's like, I personally believe that's a myth. It just depends on who you are. And, because I had a child so late, I have also this feeling of how how fantastic my life was without children. So, but it's hard because women are in this new place of trying to find, okay, what's my fulfillment level going to be? What do I get to, what will I regret?
Yeah.
What will I not regret? What can I have and not have? And it is, you definitely take a hit in the passion department for most of us. Now, for somebody whose life is built around it, it might not be as much, but it's still a real thing that, yes,
Yeah.
I don't know very many men who even lose more than a couple sessions after they have kids.
No, it is. And that's something I for sure, almost like resent, like, yes, that's wonderful for men, but it's less of a critical decision. Like I have past injuries that I struggle with just to like maintain, to make sure I can do, like, to surf most days, but even traveling, like I worry about it. Like, oh, is my back going to not function? Like, is this going to make me not be able to go out on this day? And combining that with, it's not like being pregnant or building a child is easy on your body. And then also doing, trying to balance it with like, what am I willing to risk versus reward on this? But it's also, if it's something that you're being called to do, like, how do you just say, okay, no, I'm not going to do this? But it's so much at stake, and it is, I don't know, it is definitely a tough one. And I have like men who are similar age to me, and who are married and that, and they're like, oh yeah, it's totally the time to have kids. I'm like, what about me? Should I get my eggs checked? Like, can we talk about my fertility and what I'm going to do?
Yeah. Seriously. It's a lot in there. It's a lot in there.
Yeah, totally.
And there's another thing that happens to a lot of women, just FYI, like I didn't start till I was 36. So, and I was terrible, but I was totally fearless. I'm just fearless. I mean, I would just charge over these. It was big and cold and scary, and I would just go. And then after I had a daughter, like there's a biological thing that happens to a lot of women. Like I did not have that same go. I had a moment of hesitation, and then I became a single mom. So, my poor daughter, she's like, every time I get injured, she's just like, oh my God, because it's really just us, she's like, there's a whole other thing. You're like, oh, I can't break my hands. I got to work. I got, this whole other. Yeah. So, it's good to have a partner for all that stuff,
Yeah.
I would just say, you make sure you get your demands met, girl, if you decide to go that road.
Yeah.
But it's just a lot. It's just a lot in there swirling around for
and it's interesting because a few of my really good friends who I surf with, one of them, she's just is having her second baby any day now. But it's like something that I see, and she is such an incredible surfer and was like always charged super hard before having the kid. So I like, me and a couple of our other friends try and make an effort whenever we can, which is really not that much, but like, okay, I'm here. There's waves. I got the kid. You go. Like, you go catch 5 waves while I'm on my lunch. But it's hard. Like, if you don't have a community for that, you really are on the beach.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And there's this Join Surfing Moms group that's popping up everywhere. That's the woman I was talking about earlier. Like, there's groups of moms joining together to sort of help other moms surf. But, because it just gets hard. Like, you have to check the tide. You have to check the conditions. You have to check the diaper. You have to check whether or not the kid's been fed. Like, then your kid cries. Like, she talked about putting together this group. And the first time after she trained and she did this chapter and she got it all going. And then she like hands her daughter to somebody else so she can go surf. And the daughter cries so hard, she starts throwing up. So like, she doesn't get to surf that day. So anyway, it's very kind of you to help your friends out. But it's, really the question that, we're coming down to is that it's very difficult for women to have career, child, and passion. It's hard enough to get career and child, or
career and passion
or career. Yeah. Very hard to, yes, career and passion. I mean, that is really hard, I think, because, and it's why I love hearing the stories of people who have transformed. I love the stories of people who have been transformed by surfing. It's not always a career transformation. Sometimes it's just a courage transformation. But thank you for digging into that, because I think it's important conversation, whether or not we have any. Unfortunately, there's no resolution.
No problem solved yet.
So, all right, I just want to ask the fun surf questions now.
Mhm.
So, what is your best surf day?
I feel like there's lots of really good moments. Like I can picture some awesome waves here at sunset, like the most
Hmm.
beautiful colors, but probably the it would be a toss up. Well, no, probably Fiji. The second the second
Mhm.
day we surfed Cloudbreak, and it was probably 4 or 5 feet maybe. I'm not quite sure. I feel like it's always so hard to measure waves, especially
Mhm.
in different areas and
I
what
always do
their
it by
scale is.
heads. That's the
Yeah.
only way I can do
It was
it
like
is
head
how,
over head.
yeah.
And it was just one of the longest waves I caught. Like it was already
Mm.
very intimidating to be out in Cloudbreak. Like even on the days that the first day we were there, it wasn't that big, but it was just this whole idea of like, oh my gosh, this is Cloudbreak, and then the reef, and explain that it's like shish kebabs is the inner reef, and you're like, you're like, whoa, this is high
Yeah.
consequence. But I caught this one wave, and it just kept connecting. Like it kept
Oh.
feeling like it was gonna go, and I was like, okay, I should pull out so I don't get pushed in on the reef. And it like 4 times, it just kept going, and then
Oh
it
my
connected
gosh.
onto the inner break. And a bunch of the guys who I was there with, they were all in there and just like hooting and hollering. So
Oh,
it's this
so awesome.
incredible moment of probably being the best wave I've ever caught in my life, and like the
Oh.
longest wave of my life, absolutely. And then coming in, like I'm all jazzed up and excited and just so happy about it. Then all my friends are hooting and hollering. Like it
So
was pretty fun.
awesome. No, when you surf it with like just that magic wave and then you surf it well and it's witnessed, oh,
Yeah,
what else is there? Yeah.
yeah,
And
that was pretty
celebrate
good.
it, imprint it. And so what for you when you have a hard day surfing, like how do you manage that? Like what goes on in your head to get through
Mhm.
that?
Yeah, I don't always manage it super well.
I was going to say, if you get through it.
Sometimes it's hard. Like I think the hardest days for me are days where like even the biggest day at Cloudbreak, it was like definitely pushing, for sure pushing anything I had ever surfed, but
Mhm.
this whole battle of like, okay, if I can get on a wave, I should be okay, but
Mhm.
battling the fear factor of it. So like that's always one
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that stresses me out, and that one, I tried to be that one was easier to be kind on myself for, because it's like, okay, these are big waves for my ability, but
Yeah.
definitely I'll have days here that are really challenging where it doesn't even necessarily need to be that big of a wave, but just when it's really hard to, like, your things just aren't lining up. Like you're
Yeah.
choosing the bad wave, you're choosing the wrong waves, you're getting stuck
Yeah.
on the inside, you're not paddling out in the right spot.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think there's like a lot of times I can kind of talk myself through it, but there are definitely days where I just need to go to the beach and be like, hey, you win some, you lose some. This
Yeah.
is not the day. And because it is hard, like I definitely find I'll get pretty down on myself, especially if I have a bad session.
Mm.
I don't mind going out and not catching waves and like it not working, like it just not being cool, or maybe it's like pushing my ability or whatever. But when you're in something and you're pretty like you have the skill set to do it,
Mhm.
and it's just not working, or you're not working.
Yeah.
And those I find the most challenging, because it is pretty easy to get down and think
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, I'm not a good surfer. I don't know what I'm doing. What am I doing out there? Oh man, I'm such a fraud. Like
Right.
how
Oh,
how did
yeah.
I ever lifeguard at Tavarua? Like,
Right.
are you kidding me? I
Oh.
don't know how to
Oh, you have a
surf.
whole new, yes, a whole new level of fraud now that you can bring in. What was
Uh,
I doing out there?
yeah.
That is,
But
it is a really, I don't think there's very many things, especially sports where maybe golf, I don't know, where you can be like pretty competent, one day and then literally as if it's your first day ever, like, and you
Oh
just,
yeah.
it's horrific. So I know that I know I really suffer too if I make a mistake, like get in someone's way or do one
Oh
of
gosh.
those
Yeah.
total kook mistakes, like the whole, I'm a kook,
Yeah.
like even the
Yeah.
accident I just had, like, it's still really sketchy to know exactly could I have avoided that? And, you know,
Sure.
And you just, yeah, I think the only tool I have at my disposal is acceptance, and the next day, like it's just the next day, like, okay, tomorrow will feel different. Like, it's like when you put your foot in your mouth or do anything else, you just like, tomorrow will be different.
Yeah.
Do you have any sort of surf wisdom, like that you use in the water that you apply on land, especially if you're teaching?
Yeah. I think that one would probably be it, honestly. It's like you said, like a bad wave or a bad session. It's not all encompassing of who you are or what your abilities are. As a manager, for sure, there are times where I'm like, oh man, I didn't deal with that well, or I should have done this, or I wasn't, like I just question what the interaction was, or could I have been better, or I didn't bring my best self to that. And same thing. It's like pretty easy to get down and think, oh man, I don't know what I'm doing. Like I'm terrible at this. When really it's like, okay, well, that wasn't good. Great. That, take that and move on. And yeah, I feel like that's, probably something I'd pull from surfing, because you're not a terrible surfer just because you had a kook out, or,
Yeah, right. Kook out. Oh, I love that.
You still know how to surf, you
took
a pin to the head, but you are out in these waves, you know what you're doing.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah. It's just, you're not a terrible surfer just because you had a kook out,
Yeah.
and you're not terrible at anything. And even if you are, really, like, off you go the next day to try again. So what is your favorite thing about your surfing?
Like ability, or
just whatever? Yeah. I mean, I know it's kind of a funny question to ask, but sometimes I get fun answers. Like, it could just be your approach. It could be what you do, like what you bring mentally, or what you get from it, or your ability, your skill, just,
I think it is, like, I appreciate how much I can use surfing and being in the ocean as kind of an outlet and an area to recharge, minus,
I like that.
Minus the bad days where you get more worked up. But there's like, I don't know, something almost cathartic and like therapeutic for sure about being in the ocean, and that whole dynamic of trying to, like, I want to improve. I want to keep getting better. I want to do that. But also it is just like being out there in the flow, or even just sitting out there in terrible waves. Like, there was one day, me and one of my girlfriends, we were trying to find a wave, and there was nothing, like actually nothing, but it was a beautiful sunset, and we just paddled out. Like, I'm sure people on the beach were wondering what the hell we were doing, but just that fun and kind of ability to make it fun, or take it for whatever it needs to be. Most days, not all days.
Yeah, no, I love that. Oh, I actually love surfing terrible waves.
Yeah, it's fun
because there's nobody out, yeah. And then it's just you and the water. Like, when it gets really rough, and sometimes I just start cracking up, like it's just splashing me and you can't, and you're just there. But I like that just overall approach, what you're talking about. I love that. So is there anything specifically you're working on in your surfing right now?
Definitely taking off deeper. And not, I have yet to be barreled, which is very frustrating, because I see people who have been surfing much less and are much less competent be able to accomplish it. So I can't figure out why I can't.
Yeah. Are there barrels? Is it barrelable where you surf?
Yeah, we'll get days for sure. And they're much smaller barrels, and they're heavy, but for sure there's barrels. And yeah, so that, taking off deeper with the hopes of getting barreled. And then I think too, like, just using kind of better flow, or using the wave more fully. I think a lot of our waves here are short and fast, where it drops out beneath you and you just get on it, and maybe you have enough time for 2 turns, maybe 3 turns. Whereas it's cool when I travel, or, even in Fiji was the most recent one, but the ability to spend more time on the wave and actually like look and think about, okay, get low, bottom turn, get high, and use it in a more productive manner than just getting on it and hoping to God you stay on it.
It's similar here. It's really short. So
Yeah.
a lot of the waves are really short. So yeah, that's getting the chance to just get that flow when that finally happens is so awesome. Are there any other, like a couple spots that you've been to that you think are really good for getting to surf longer waves?
Yeah, I've surfed Puerto Rico a bunch, and there's, depending on the swell, there can be very fun waves, and they're
Mm.
definitely, I mean, I think pretty much everywhere I've surfed except here has longer waves or has longer waves in here.
I guess, yeah.
But Puerto Rico is pretty fun. I went to Jamaica last winter, and that was surprisingly good.
Wow. I just don't think about Jamaica
Yeah.
even having waves. So
Yeah, definitely
awesome.
similar to here. Like, I mean, there's reef, but some of it felt more like beach break, like kind of the dumpier, faster, but there were a few longer ones. And then I've surfed in Hawaii a little bit, and there's some great waves out there, but
depends. Yeah, I'm on the Kona side of the Big Island, so there's a few, like, and especially in the winter, certain peak swells, but a lot of places it's kind of short too,
yeah.
especially where I serve. But so, last question for you: Is there anything? Is there one thing really that you would want other women surfers to know?
Oh gosh. You probably won't get eaten by a shark if you bleed out.
Oh, I love that. That's important. That's very important.
I don't want to say that, but I just feel like that's like a huge one just on the tampon side where people are like, oh my God, I can't surf when I'm on my period. I'm like, look, I've been there. Definitely like overstayed. It's fine. You'll be fine.
I think that's really, really super helpful. If that's
But
where you
don't
would
quote
leave
me
it,
on
we
it,
can. If
'cause I
you
don't
have
know.
more wisdom, we'd love to have it.
But aside from that, I think like just make surfing whatever you want it to be. Like it doesn't have to be what other people make it, like I have days where when we get good swell, everyone from Virginia Beach drives down, which are typically 20-year-old dudes with high ego, and it's some days that stresses me out because I'm like, I feel like I need to compete with them. And it's like, okay, well, I don't need to get into a paddle battle with them. Like I can just choose what I want it to be. And if that means going to a different peak where it's less people and maybe catching a few more waves that aren't as good, like it's fine if you want. And I think from a learning perspective too, like having taught a lot of people kiting and surfing, I think we often get in our heads of thinking any sport like this has to be one thing. Like you're not a surfer unless you're in like double overhead waves, or you're not a kiter unless you're doing this. Like you can take it whatever you need it. You can go catch baby waves every day and enjoy the heck out of that, So it doesn't need to be what someone else wants it to be for you.
I love that. Well, that is an awesome closing. And thank you so much. Thank you so much for sticking through with me and us finally getting a chance to chat. And I really appreciate what you had to share. You really have
thanks for having me.
a fresh perspective, and it was awesome.